Hi, everyone. Wow, Daniel just teed us up perfectly for a really rich and robust conversation this afternoon. Once upon a time, a young person could graduate with their business degree in hand and embark on a 30-plus year career, potentially in accounting or marketing. But no longer. Today, we can only reasonably predict about 50% of the jobs that are likely to exist in 25 years. Things that are easily routinized will fade away, so that means we'll say farewell to things like cashiers or loan officers or paralegals. Companies are starting to pay attention to this. For example, AT&T earlier this year announced a $1 billion effort to retool half of its pretty massive workforce to upgrade their skills for the future. So how do we know what's the right direction to go? I think a lot about the hundreds of thousands of kids, young Americans today, who are attending low-performing schools. Daniel just described his experience. His story, sadly, is not an uncommon one. Those students typically are children of color. They are living near or below the poverty line. And far too often, those are the same young people who end up in low-wage, low-skill jobs because of their subpar education and the fact that they don't have real choices for their futures. So what does this mean? This brings up these great big questions. When those low-wage and low-skill jobs start to fade, that's the first group that will be disproportionately impacted by this change. What does this mean for America's widening gap between the haves and the have-nots? My lunch table conversation, my colleagues at lunch, we were talking about this. What does it mean for America's competitiveness globally? And we don't think of this as a Republican issue or a Democratic issue. This is an important American issue. So at the Bush Institute, we think that schools that well prepare all of their kids for success in their futures typically have two things in common. First, they have a strong principal, strong leader. Holly was talking about leadership. Second, they embrace accountability. So first, think about the very best boss you ever had. You can borrow someone else's if you never really had a great one. You have them in mind? All right, so that person likely challenged you, but they also supported you, right? They were invested in your success. They had your back. That is exactly what a great school principal does for the adults and the kids in their building, right? They hire and retain, that's important, great teachers, and they set a positive school culture for the kids and their families. Early in my career, I taught 8th grade social studies. It was equal parts awesome and incredibly difficult. I was working really hard, but honestly, most days I was kind of flying blind. I really needed some expert help. I'm not ashamed to say that. Me and this rooms of 13 and 14-year-olds. Ultimately, I'm not really sure if my kids got what they needed from me in my classroom and were prepared when they took their next step. I think I saw my principal maybe once in my classroom that first year, and I ended up taking an opportunity outside the classroom over the summer, even though there was a lot I really loved about teaching. That still makes me a little sad 20-some years later when I look back on it, because I think, what could have been different for me, but most importantly for my students, had I had the mentorship of a strong instructional leader as a principal? That's why at the Bush Institute, our work is designed to support school districts in their ability to recruit, support, and retain those highly effective school principals in every school in their district that do all those things that enable student success. So like school leadership, we also believe in strong accountability. You hear that a lot in education. Here's how we define it, pretty simply with 3 elements. First, you set high standards for what students should know and understand. Second, you measure their progress to those standards. And third, you use that data to meaningfully design and implement interventions that are going to support student success. We think this matters so intensely because it reflects the belief that all kids, regardless of race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, geography, deserve to learn and succeed and deserves access to a great school. But sadly, that's not the case in many places around the community. Again, Daniel was telling you about this. If you and I went to visit some struggling schools this afternoon, you'd likely hear or see, implicitly or explicitly, things like, well, some kids are just never going to do that well, and gosh, it's really hard to catch some of these kids up. So President Bush very memorably described this phenomenon of assigning different expectations to certain kids as the soft bigotry of low expectations. It was a powerfully said phrase then, it's powerful now, and it guides much of our work. At the Bush Institute, we seek to support city and state leaders to understand and embrace accountability in their education practice and policy so that all kids in their communities and in their states have access to a great school and, more importantly, have genuine choices for their futures. So when we think about how should we redesign education, let's not forget what we know. No matter what kind of school it is, if the kids are in charge or not, you got to have a strong principal. And number two, no matter what kind of job a child has, eventually, they're going to need to read, write, do math, and problem solve. So it makes sense that we would measure their progress in those areas to make sure that they're on track. But we also know there's a lot still to discover about how kids learn and how we should meaningfully measure their success. And so that's why today I'm so delighted and honored to introduce you to our special guest, Dr. Priscilla Chan. For those of you who don't know her, Dr. Chan is herself a physician and an educator. She is the real deal. In 2015, she co-founded the Chan-Zuckerberg initiative with her husband, Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook. Priscilla and Mark have committed to pledging the bulk of their personal wealth to give it away during their lifetimes. That's already resulted in significant philanthropic investments that the public is benefiting from, including several in education that we'll talk about today. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Priscilla Chan to the stage. Thank you. All right, Priscilla, welcome to Dallas.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here at the Bush Center, and I just want to acknowledge that, you know, in our work in education, we stand on the shoulders of the work Barbara Bush did, so she will be missed.
Yes, thank you. She was an incredible role model in her work in literacy. We're so glad to have you here and to hear about your work that you're doing. So why don't we start with telling everybody what is the Chan-Zuckerberg Initiative, commonly known as CCI, for those in the know. What is it?
Well, the Chan-Zuckerberg Initiative is a philanthropy that Mark and I founded 2 years ago. We always knew that we were going to give back, but we always thought it was going to be later in the future. And then we got pregnant with our daughter, Max, and we had that extremely human experience of, oh God, the future is now. She's coming, and if we want her to live in this incredible world that's beyond her wildest dreams, we needed to start doing our part in helping build that world. And so we did it. We launched CCI in the end of 2015 with the goal of building a philanthropy that engineers change at scale. And what we do is we fund work in three main areas. We work in education, science, and a group called Justice and Opportunity. But one thing that we're incredibly aware of is that while we may have significant resources, we are small. And we need to be very careful about how we leverage our opportunity. And what I mean is, if you think about scale of resources in science, our annual budget in science is a little less than $300 million a year. But the NIH funds $30 billion a year. So what can we do to actually create change in science with our work? And so we really took a step back and really thought, beyond resources, what else do Mark and I bring to this work? And with that, we thought about our day job of who we are. And that, for me, that was being a school teacher and a pediatrician, having been on the front lines with families and children, and realizing that you really need to be there on the front lines to understand what the real barriers and problems are, and that incredibly innovative solutions already exist on those front lines. They're just often one-offs that don't have the opportunity to scale and reach many. And I've been lucky enough in many ways to be partnered with Mark, and he brings the lens of a technologist. He's built a career in building great tools that scale to reach many. And so we took those lenses together and boiled down to a couple of core values that we think about at CCI. we want to stay close to the problem. We have the luxury and patience to invest for the long term, and we also know that collaboration across sectors is key, will be key to our success at CCI.
That's great. So I have to tell you, when I was in your offices, I was struck by two things. The first was, it reflects a little bit of what you said. Everyone I spoke to, and I met with a number of folks on your team to get a sense of the work you all are doing, and they commonly have a boldness of purpose and a total humility in their approach. And can you tell us a little bit about how will you all define success? Because you are talking about long term, you're early in your lives as you started this, so how will you define success for CCI?
Yeah, so we've set incredibly long-term goals for our work. And so that means in 50 to 100 years, every student is empowered to learn and be prepared for a changing world. In science, we want to cure, prevent, or manage all disease. In justice and opportunity, we want to be able to be part of building just systems that allow all individuals to contribute to their community. But that's really long term. What are we actually going to do, and how will we know? Yeah. I painted a beautiful picture.
Thank you for asking yourself that question.
Yes. But it's really it's part of whether or not our experiment in really thinking about philanthropy in a different way is hopefully in 10 or 15 years we'll have refined that and we'll understand how it works. Because at CCI, we don't just do traditional grant making. We do grant making, we do for-profit investing, we do advocacy work. We lift up a lot of the stories of our partners in the community, and we want to build a movement that's bigger than us. And I think most unique is we build technology. About half of our organization is technology, and we build tools for the folks that we're trying to serve in education, science, and in the justice and opportunity work. And for that means that one, we've learned and we understand how our model really works, and we can choose great problems to apply that toolkit to. But then in education, we are really in a world where teachers are demanding better tools for their work, and they're able to better serve the students where they are every day. In science, we should be seeing those early breakthroughs in our investments in the infrastructure that we're building today. And in justice and opportunity, we're taking the lessons learned in the hotspot communities that we're supporting. They're doing great work and scaling those to really be able to reach more communities in need.
So that brings me to the second thing that I observed when I was in your offices. It is a bullpen of engineers working on like dual screens around. It reminded me of the startup I worked in right after college in the first tech boom. How are they infused in your work? It's completely distinctive, your structure of CCI and the fact that you have so many engineers on your staff. So how does that work? How do they inform or execute your strategy?
Yeah. Our engineering teams work incredibly closely with what we call our initiative teams. In science, they work side by side. The engineers are building the data infrastructure for something we call the Human Cell Atlas. We think of it as the next generation of the Human Genome Project, where we understand cells in different cell states. So the engineers are building that infrastructure, but they're not building it in a box by themselves. What they're doing is working closely with the scientists on our staff, but also scientists in the field actually doing that work to figure out what the needs are and building and iterating alongside them. And the strategy between technology and the programmatic work is one. There is only one strategy, and we collaborate, but everyone has the lens of where we are actually leveraged to be able to take advantage of our full toolkit. A very similar situation is in education, but our partners are in the field. We partner with a group, several groups, but most prominently the Summit Public Schools, where we are learning from their pedagogical approach and what they need for their teachers to succeed in the classroom, and building them tools and technology to help them do their work better and also share their approach with other schools that are interested.
Well, let's turn to education and talk a little bit about that. But I know your own personal experience growing up and as a physician and educator have really informed the strategic tact you've taken. Tell everybody a little bit about your story.
Yeah. You know, Anne said nice things about me before I came out, but it misses something that's so core to who I am and why I do this work. You know, it's incredible that I'm here today, and that's the second half of the story, but the first half of the story is more important. My family were Chinese Vietnamese refugees to this country in the 70s. My grandmother was illiterate and you know, worked supporting a family as her employment. And my parents showed up as boat people and refugees to this country with very little. And I was lucky enough to be in a great public school system where a couple of teachers really saw potential in me and supported that. And so thanks to a couple of people who took the extra time, I was able to show up at Harvard Yard that first day. And like, if you just froze my life on that day, would have lived the fullest version of the American dream. But I realized also that I owed everything to a few folks who showed me what was possible, and that there are many, many folks like me, and Daniel, who shared his incredible story, that don't have that opportunity and didn't get lucky. And so right then in college, I grew up very close to Harvard, and I decided to run an after-school program that was in the next community over from where I grew up in a low-income housing project, and helped kids with their homework there. And I was 18, super idealistic, wanted to help some kids with their homework and do better. But what I saw was there was an incredible number of barriers that prevented kids from even getting to the classroom, so forget their homework. Kids were unsafe, involved in gang violence, lived in unclean housing conditions, had a number of medical issues that needed tending to. And there's a little girl that I remember well that then compelled me to become a physician, and she had missed a number of days of school, and her school counselor came by looking for her, and I said, sure, I'll help you find her. And I walked out to the playground, and I found her almost immediately, and I was really actually upset with her. And when I asked her why she had missed school and had not been to the after-school program either, she started talking, and her front 2 teeth were broken. And I had just crushed, and so many questions, and where I had failed in not doing my part to prevent her from getting hurt. And so, I was 22, and the solution to that was to go to medical school. So I spent a decade training to be a pediatrician in San Francisco Safety Net Hospital. And I ended up succeeding in that I became a doctor taking care of the same kids that I had been working with in college, except this time I was a physician and I was making diagnoses, but there were no prescriptions for actually what was going on and keeping my patients from being successful. And so I saw the flip side of the same problem, but still helpless. And that's what really prompted me to try to take a step up and from that front lines and think about how we should be doing work differently on the systems level to make sure that these great public systems that serve our most underserved children are actually doing their job.
Well, yes. So part of what your experience was to keep learning, right? Mm-hmm. You just kept learning, and that has been such an important driver for you. Part of our topic today is about the importance of that sensibility for kids, like what it means to become a lifelong learner. And tell us a little bit about what skills or what you think is most important for kids today as they're looking forward. This is not going to sound humble, and I also think it's true of all of you in this room. I was a really good student. Totally.
Were you guys pretty good students? But what that means is that I am really good at sitting in a lecture hall just like this, listening to someone share information, write it down, and then tell it back to someone later. I'm still really good at it, and if I were in your seat, I'd really having a good time. I'm having a good time up here too. But like, when I actually went to work with families, build the primary school, build CCI, I didn't have any of that skill set. No one ever prepared me for that. I asked my friends who got MBAs, I was like, did they teach you this? And they're like, no. So the core of it is our current systems, even if we are wildly successful, don't actually prepare students to do what they need to do in the workplace. And what my hope is that we actually think about how we can actually change that, how we can actually educate our students in a way that prepares them for the real life workplace. And where I've seen it most successfully in K-12 education, and where I get a lot of my inspiration from, is actually a school visit that I did to a group called Summit Public Schools. I walked in to their small school network in the Bay Area in Washington. I walked into the school and I didn't recognize where I was. I saw middle school and high schoolers working in all different types of configurations. There were groups of kids problem solving together and teaching each other about how to solve a problem that a teacher had posed to them. I saw teachers working one-on-one, having a mini conference on what a particular kid needed. I saw a kid working by themselves on a project that I didn't even recognize as something that you could do in school. He was building, he was working on a web media project. And my question was like, what is this? Where am I? Because this is what I see folks actually doing in the workplace. Problem solving on their own, applying what they're learning in a way that's meaningful in the real world. And when they don't know how to do something, they know how to actually ask for help and get the right resources. And what I realized in that school visit is that this group had been able to really flip what the classroom looks like historically to what would be preparing kids for success in the future. And that's why we've been so proud to be supporting and sharing their work with even more schools to do what Summit has been doing.
If you get a chance to visit a Summit charter school, public school, take it. They're fantastic. You all, CCI has made some investments in personalized learning, what you're talking about. I think we have a video clip that will help folks explain your approach. So we'll take a look at that, and then we'll talk a little bit more.
The average kid with a one-on-one tutor compared to kids in a normal classroom, average, the 50th percentile kid will outperform 98% of the kids in the other class. Okay, now I know it is not about the kids. It's about, can I actually create the kinds of learning experiences that let any kid get the kind of benefit that you get when you have a one-on-one tutor.
How do we actually learn how kids learn? And can we make that portable to be able to be adaptive and personalized to what a kid needs?
Imagine that you are a teacher and you have one student in front of you. What does the student know? What don't they know? What do they think they know that they don't know? What are they interested in? How motivated are they to stay? Can the student see the board? Those things have a huge impact on how you think about how you teach. Now, imagine you're that same teacher, but you have 35 kids in front of you. If you're talking about a middle or high school teacher, they probably see 150 students a day. And you still have all of those same questions that you need to resolve in order to figure out how to reach every single one of them. It's extraordinarily difficult for any given teacher to keep that in her head for every student that she serves. And I think by recognizing that you're trying to empower people and provide them with tools, we're going to actually hopefully create things that let us make dramatic progress on the thing that matters most, learning. And then the big question is, can you do that in a way that makes that accessible to every single teacher everywhere so you can ultimately take it to scale? That's what we're uniquely qualified to do at CCI.
So that's a great snippet of this work. You mentioned Summit and how your investment is helping to scale what they're doing to other other schools and districts. Tell us a little bit about that investment and what you're learning so far.
Yeah. So Jim talks a little bit about personalized learning in this video, and it's a term a lot of folks in education are using, but I want to anchor this in that it's not anything new. Personalized learning is just great teaching, and it's being able to give the student that's in front of you what she needs at the right moment. But like Jim talks about, it's incredibly hard to do. And what we hope to do is actually just make that easier so that all teachers can practice in a way that is best for student outcomes. And what we've done is actually work closely with Summit to think about their pedagogical approach and what they think they've done to achieve the outsized outcomes that they have at their schools. And we take that and we've helped them build with our engineering team a tool called Summit Learning, where we've embedded a lot of tools that help them achieve their pedagogical school model and paired it with professional development, with training for their teachers. And with that tool, we've actually been able to spread their approach that's built for schools, by schools, to schools nationwide, where we now support over 300 schools nationwide and over 50,000 students. And there's actually I will give a shout out to one of our star districts, Pasadena in Texas, that has really done a fantastic job. And we're excited about their work, and they're excited to help us improve. But the core of it is a couple of pieces. We helped build project-based learning. We build time and space for one-on-one mentoring, and we allow individualized pathways to understand where each student is and what the next step they need to take to advance and what the best modality might be for that student. And so it's really a partnership with the schools to figure out what needs to happen for students, and us building the tools to allow many more schools to be able to access that.
So it's always a great strategy to commend something in Texas while you're in Texas. So well done. So I want to unpack a little bit of what you just described, and to talk a little bit first about technology, and then about teachers, and then about students and their experience with personalized learning. So sometimes people get nervous when they hear about technology or screens in classrooms. So are you talking about a kid sitting in front of a laptop and the computer teaches them? Or is it something different?
That is the worst. As a parent, I totally understand the concerns, and I agree with the concerns. You don't want your kids sitting in front of a computer all day, and that's not what we're aiming to do. I actually had a conversation with the superintendent of the Pasadena, Texas school district, and we were like, we hate it when they use that stock photo of a kid behind a computer all day, because that's not what we're trying to achieve. The technology is not the centerpiece here. It's really about empowering the teacher and giving the right tools to the student. And so what we're talking about is actually using technology to make it the job of the teacher easier, and being really able to highlight those individual relationships that need to happen to make great teaching happen. And I want that for all children, and I know that that's what put me on the path to being able to be successful.
So you talked about teaching there. What is the teacher's experience when personalized learning? Are they needing to learn a new way to operate or teach, or what are they telling you about what they like or don't like about using this model in the classrooms? What are you seeing? The teachers are really excited about all the learning that needs to happen. And so it's not something you can sort of open out of a box and do it one day, because it's not a singular tool, it's an approach. And we've invested a lot in building summer training and professional development for teachers and school leaders and district leaders to be able to understand what they need to do to make to be part of this new school model. And so it's
it's time intensive, but we've seen incredible commitment from school districts and teachers that want to do this. And what I've heard that is the most rewarding is that it opens up the window to not teach to 30 different kids and maybe hit the mark with a few students, but they've been able to develop these one-on-one relationships in a deep understanding of what each one of their student needs. That's the meat of it. That's the heart of personalized learning. And we're trying to do a lot more to make sure that that happens. But that's a partnership. That's not something we can just build into the technology platform. And that's not something, it requires the school really rethinking the way school works.
What did the students tell you? Do the students like it? Do they think it's harder or easier, or do they shrug, like sometimes teenagers will shrug?
What I've seen is students are most excited about the project-based learning because they spend a lot of the day asking why. Why am I doing this? And sometimes there really isn't a good reason if you don't try to think about it. It's like, do it just because, and that's awful. But with the projects, they see why. And, you know, there's one student we were talking with, and she was working on some writing and literacy skills. And that was okay. But when she got to apply it to a journalism project, and then she started writing blogs and actually doing a podcast, she got so excited about what she was learning, she went back to figure out what other skills she needed to do what she was doing better. So to push deeper into the meat of what we want all students to be learning, but also building incredible confidence about what she was able to do. And then, you know, asking the question, is this what I want to do when I grow up? Maybe, maybe not. But like really having that spark of, wow, I can do this, is the thing that inspires me.
Yeah, inspires anybody who knows a kid when you see the spark, right? Part of the work we do with districts, we know there's a lot of power in bringing them together when they're learning new things. I know that's part of your model. Tell us a little bit about how you're connecting these educators who are testing out this summit platform around the country.
So we've had a number of convenings around the country where we bring together school leaders at all levels to really get a sense of what they're interested in and what their barriers are. Because this is not something static that Summit is sharing or we're building. It's something that is really built based on feedback and collaboration about what needs to get done to make it easy for teachers and to actually produce outcomes. So we're trying to make it better every day, and we really appreciate and value the convenings where we can learn from those actually practicing.
Great. Let's make a little shift to the primary school, the school that you helped found, which right now sits in East Palo Alto, if those of you familiar with Silicon Valley. East Palo Alto has had somewhat of a notorious history. I think we have a photo up of students at work at the primary school. This is an integrated education and health model. Tell everyone a little bit about how it came to be and what your model looks like in action.
Yeah, the primary school is a separate organization from CCI. I think in a fit of finishing residency, I thought I could do everything. So I launched the philanthropy and the school at the same time. And the school, it's really built upon the experiences that I shared with you, and really feeling like I had failed as an after-school teacher and a school teacher, and then failed as a pediatrician. I was not able to actually help the kids succeed and be on a productive track in the way that I want to be. And my realization was that in primary care, we have a lot of information, but none of the treatment arm to actually make the changes we want to see in the way kids are kept healthy. We're not able to do the preventative work that we want to do. And on the education side, school teachers are not able to actually educate their students often because they are coming in with so many barriers and challenges that they're not ready and present in their seat to actually learn. There's a lot more going on there. And so what we aim to do at the primary school is actually rethink the way these two systems work, at really putting the kids and the parents at the center of it, to have the systems be greater than the sum of their parts. And so we are working at really rethinking the way primary care works and the way education works. We take a whole child approach and thinking about what each student needs to succeed. And a couple of the examples of what we do, we have an asthma program. Asthmatics miss a lot of school, especially in the winter. And they also, when you look at K through 12, they are behind their peers, and a large part of that is because of their health issues. And so we do, at the primary school, we do regular health screenings, and we look at their asthma control. And when it's not well controlled, we send a note to the pediatrician who can tune up their baseline controller medications to try to keep the kid in school more days. We also look at issues like homelessness. We have parent coaches that help the parents understand what do we need to do together to help you be successful. And that ranges in issues from homelessness to food security to looking for employment. One thing that was most surprising to me the first year we opened the primary school was that our students who we knew were marginally housed, we couldn't wake up from their naps very easily. They would nap all afternoon. And we were kind of stuck there saying, do we wake her up for math or do we just let her sleep? And that's an awful trade-off to have to make. But we were seeing those real-life consequences of the challenging circumstances our students were in. And so we work closely with the parents to help improve access resources to improve their housing situation, but also working with them, with their pediatrician, to really think about their sleep hygiene and how can they build those better habits today. And so we're working and really redefining what the factors are for success, and also building systems to help put the parent at the center, but really weave together our important public systems so that our students can be successful.
When I was meeting with your staff running the primary school on the day-to-day basis, I was really struck by how they're grappling with these incredibly challenging questions. Nothing is simple in this work. And we started talking about scale. So I was thinking, is your plan to open lots of the primary school? How are you thinking about scaling the impact and lessons that you're learning in East Palo Alto?
We are very cognizant that we can't serve all the children that need more support. And so we have to think about what can we do in a replicable and sustainable way. And we don't want to be one special school that gets great results because of all of the unique opportunities that our students might have. And so we actually, we're a small school right now. We have about 150 students, but we have 2 folks dedicated to thinking about data, what kind of outcomes we want to be tracking, and how we can actually think about what we do as portable programs to share with other schools. So we don't want to be in the business of building many schools. Frankly, that's both exhausting and not the most effective. But how can we actually share our best practices to other schools who are interested in doing more and learning from our experiences?
CCI works in a number of areas, not just education, although it's my personal favorite. We know you do other work. And I saw some interesting posts recently about your work in criminal justice reform. And obviously, there's no silos, really, between the topics that you're working on. Tell us a little bit about what's happening in the criminal justice reform work in your shop.
Our criminal justice reform work is related in what we call justice and opportunity. We want to make sure that we are helping build just, fair, and forgiving systems. Because in order to build strong communities, we need to make sure that every individual has the opportunity to contribute. And if they have committed a crime, that it's adjudicated fairly, and then there's an opportunity for forgiveness and rehabilitation. And so we've really been working closely with learning about the space and there are a couple of properties that are really interesting to us. One, it's something that folks in all parties are excited about, and that's really unique. And our hope is that we can actually be part of a nonpartisan movement to actually improve the way our criminal justice reform movement works. And the other thing that's exciting is that it's work at the local, more local level. It is state and county-based work. And that means that we can learn quickly when it's a problem that can be solved by different folks in different circumstances, and there's not one decision maker or one chance to actually try to solve the problem. We can learn from folks. There's recently great work in Louisiana and then in Mississippi passing common sense measures that we're able to support. We can take those learnings and share them with folks who are doing work in Oklahoma, and just so many more opportunities for learning for us to be part of a greater movement that can get better over time and try different tactics.
I know part of that same initiative, your opportunity side, our next panel is talking about economic opportunity. What do you have cooking there? I know you're a startup. Everything's sort of new ideas. What are you excited about learning in that space?
Well, economic mobility is definitely our most nascent work, and right now we're in the exploration phase. We want to learn about what are the best practices out there, and I've actually learned a lot from folks here today about work where we can help, especially young people, build the skills that they need to be successful in the workplace and in the changing economy. We don't want it. The world is changing quickly, and that's a good thing, but we need our workforce to be able to change quickly and adapt with them as well. And we've recently launched a couple of grants. One's called the Community Thrives Challenge, where we're just asking a question. Tell us what you're doing that is really changing outcomes for young folks and allowing them to be on a pathway to success. And that hopefully will put us in touch with individuals doing great work in local communities, learning from them, and trying to figure out if we can help them scale and reach and impact more people's lives.
Great. Well, there's some experts on the next panel. They might be helpful, perfectly timed. So as you've seen, leadership is pretty serious business around the Bush Center, something we talk and think about a lot. And you described your own personal journey from the kid growing up next to Harvard to co-founding and leading this incredible initiative that's got decades of impact in front of you. Tell us a little bit about your own personal leadership journey and how you view your own leadership now, potentially a little differently than you may have before.
I've learned that it's a process, it's a journey. There's not one answer that you can look up somewhere in a book, and it's really about being patient and realizing that when you don't get things exactly right the first time, that's okay. I wouldn't call it a failure. It's just you haven't gotten it right yet, so try again. And it's a value that I try to live every day. But also the values that I talked about at the beginning, staying close to the problems, knowing that you are trying to solve the right problem is important, but it also means that you are close to the work and the inspiration that keeps your energy and enthusiasm for the work. It keeps the spark alive, knowing that collaboration is the tool. I don't know everything, and that's okay, because I get to partner and work with folks who are experts in their fields, and together, we are greater than the sum of our parts. And that this work takes a long time, and this is going to be a lifetime of work, and all that really matters is that we continue to improve and learn along the way.
That's great. We've covered a lot of ground. There's lots more directions we could go, but I know we don't have all afternoon. The stakes are high for us, right? Their stakes are high in many areas. Tell us, what is your vision of what's possible? What could the world look like if actually all of us working in education, economic opportunities, and these other things, what could the world look like, and why does that matter so much to you if we're successful?
So this is a really good question, and I think each one of you probably has someone or an experience that is really why you do this work. Sorry, I told you.
I know, it's okay. We need, like, on the Today Show when the tissues come down from the ceiling.
Actually, there's someone in each one of in your hearts and spirits of why you do this work. And for me, it's the student I told you about at the beginning, where I was helpless. She was not in a good place, and I didn't have any tools to actually help her. And my hope and our hope at CCI is that we need to build modern solutions, data-driven solutions that help us actually not be helpless in that moment, and to be able to better serve that person, that kid, that adult, that family member in your life that drives you to actually want to do this work and do better. And so what I keep thinking about every time I get excited about something that we're doing is this is helping someone be able to serve and do their work better in the future. That leaves fewer people behind.
It sounds like, yes, thank you. President Bush talks about my charge to keep, his charge to keep. We all think about it. Thank you so much for sharing your charge to keep with us and with everyone here. I'm really grateful for your time and you sharing your experience, and we're grateful for the leadership of you and Mark in CCI and the work that you're doing. So please join me in thanking Dr. Priscilla Chan. Thank you.
It takes so many different things to run a school, and it's